The massive doors of the Zephyrian War Council chamber opened with a soft hiss. Commander Ben Torres stepped through, his heavy boots echoing against the smooth crystal floor. Behind him, 3 other human marines followed in formation. Their armor was scratched and dented from countless battles, telling stories of survival against impossible odds. The chamber stretched high above them, its walls made of gleaming blue crystal that caught and reflected light in dancing patterns. 12 tall chairs arranged in a circle dominated the center of the room. Each chair held a Zephyrian council member, their bird-like forms imposing and regal. Golden and silver feathers caught the crystal light, making them appear almost divine. Ben had been in this chamber many times over the past 3 years. Each visit had been about strategy, about the next battle against the Devourers, about saving another star system from destruction. This time was different. This time, he was asking for something that could end the war forever. High Counselor Kira sat in the tallest chair, directly across from where Ben stood. Her golden feathers were perfectly arranged, and her dark eyes studied him with the intensity of a predator. She had led the Zephyrian people for over a century, and her wisdom was respected across the galaxy. But Ben knew that wisdom sometimes became stubbornness. "Commander Torres," Kira spoke, her voice carrying easily through the vast chamber. "You have requested this emergency session. The Council will hear your proposal." Ben straightened his shoulders. The weight of his armor felt heavier than usual today. "Honored Council, for 3 years, humans and Zephyrians have fought side by side against the Devourer threat. We have saved 47 star systems and evacuated over 2 billion beings from 12 species." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the Council. Several members nodded their approval. The partnership between humans and Zephyrians had indeed been successful, even if it had been born from desperation rather than trust. However, Ben continued, "The war continues. The Devourers adapt to our tactics. They build stronger ships, larger swarms. Intelligence reports suggest they are preparing for a massive offensive that will target the core worlds of both our species." The council chamber fell silent. Everyone knew the reports Ben spoke of. The Devourers had been quiet for 6 months, but their mechanical scouts had been seen near heavily populated systems. Something big was coming. "I propose we strike first," Ben said, his voice growing stronger. "A coordinated assault on their homeworld. End this war before they can launch their final attack." Council member Vex, an elderly Zephyrian with silver-streaked feathers, leaned forward. "Such an operation would require enormous resources. The casualty projections alone would be staggering. Which is why I volunteer to lead the assault," Ben replied without hesitation. "Give me command of a joint fleet. Human ships for the initial strike, Zephyrian vessels for support and extraction. I have studied Devourer tactics for 3 years. I know how they think, how they fight." High Counselor Kira raised one wing, silencing the whispers that had begun among the council members. "Commander Torres, your service has been valuable. Your species has proven useful in this conflict. But leadership of such a critical operation requires more than battlefield experience." Ben felt a chill run down his spine. The way Kira said, "useful," made it clear she did not see humans as equals. "Respectfully, High Counselor, my record speaks for itself. The Battle of Nexus Station, the rescue at Keth Colony, the defense of the trade routes near." "Yes," Kira interrupted, her voice growing colder. "We are well aware of your military actions. We are also aware of their cost." The chamber grew quiet again, but this time the silence felt hostile. Ben noticed several council members shifting uncomfortably in their chairs. Others watched him with expressions that ranged from pity to disapproval. "At Nexus Station," Kira continued, "you ignored direct orders and led a frontal assault that destroyed 3 Devourer ships but cost us 2 cruisers and their crews. At Keth Colony, your rescue operation saved 8,000 civilians but resulted in the loss of our most advanced destroyer. Every victory you claim comes with a price paid in Zephyrian blood." Ben felt his face flush with anger, but he kept his voice steady. "War has costs, High Counselor. But those operations saved lives. Without human intervention. Without human recklessness, Kira cut him off again, we would have found better solutions. Solutions that did not require throwing ships and lives away for dramatic gestures. Council member Thane, a younger Zephyrian with bright blue feathers, spoke up. Perhaps the commander's unconventional methods have merit. The Devourers do not expect direct assaults. Kira turned her sharp gaze on Thane. Unconventional methods? Is that what we call it when soldiers abandon strategy for bloodlust? The words hit Ben like a physical blow. Around the chamber, he could see his human marines tensing behind him. Sergeant Lisa Park, who had fought beside him for 2 years, stepped forward slightly. Ben held up a hand to stop her. High Counselor, Ben said carefully, human tactics may seem aggressive, but they have proven effective. We study our enemies, we adapt, we take calculated risks. Kira stood from her chair, her full height making her tower over the human delegation. Calculated risks. Commander, your species fights like wild animals. You charge into battle without proper planning. You make decisions based on emotion rather than logic. You treat war like some primitive contest of strength rather than a careful science. The council chamber was completely silent now. Even the soft hum of the ventilation system seemed to have stopped. Ben stared at Kira, processing her words. Behind him, he could hear Sergeant Park's breathing grow rapid and angry. You speak of your victories, Kira continued, her voice growing louder with each word. But what you call courage, we call stupidity. What you call heroism, we call waste. Your species has one strategy: throw yourselves at the enemy and hope your primitive aggression overwhelms their defenses. Ben opened his mouth to respond, but Kira was not finished. You want to lead our most important military operation? You want us to trust the fate of both our civilizations to human judgment? Kira's feathers rustled with agitation. Humans are reckless. Emotional. Unpredictable. You fight like beasts, not soldiers. You make choices with your hearts instead of your minds. Other council members began nodding in agreement. Council member Zara, who had always seemed friendly to the human delegation, looked away from Ben's gaze. Your kind has cost us too many ships with your impulsive heroics, Kira declared. Too many good Zephyrian warriors have died cleaning up the chaos you create with your wild charges and desperate gambits. We will not entrust our species' survival, our children's future, to human bloodlust and primitive thinking. The final words echoed through the crystal chamber like hammer blows. Ben stood perfectly still, feeling the eyes of every council member on him. Some looked sympathetic, others appeared relieved that someone had finally spoken the truth about human tactics. Behind him, Sergeant Park whispered angrily, "Commander, we should respond to this insult." Ben remained motionless for several seconds, his mind processing what had just happened. 3 years of fighting together, of saving lives together, of building what he had thought was mutual respect and trust. All of it dismissed as bloodlust and primitive thinking. Slowly, deliberately, Ben began removing his armor. He started with his helmet, setting it down gently on the crystal floor. The metallic clang echoed through the silent chamber. Next came his chest plate, then his arm guards, each piece placed carefully beside the others. "Commander, what are you doing?" Council member Thane asked, confusion clear in his voice. Ben said nothing. He continued removing his armor piece by piece. His weapon holsters, his equipment belt, his rank insignia, everything that marked him as a warrior in service to the Zephyrian Alliance. The pile of metal and composite materials grew larger on the crystal floor. High Counselor Kira watched this display with growing confusion. "Commander Torres, explain your actions." When the last piece of armor had been removed, Ben stood in his simple uniform, looking smaller and more human than he had in years. His fellow Marines stared at him in shock. Sergeant Park reached out as if to stop him from whatever he was planning. Ben looked directly at High Counselor Kira. His voice was quiet, almost conversational. You have made your position clear, High Counselor. You do not trust human judgment or human methods. You believe we are too primitive, too emotional, too reckless to be trusted with important decisions. Kira's feathers settled slightly. Commander, if you wish to discuss. There is nothing to discuss, Ben interrupted gently. You have spoken your truth. I accept it. He turned toward the chamber doors, leaving his armor and weapons where they lay. The other human marines looked between their abandoned commander and the pile of military equipment, uncertain what they should do. Where are you going, human? Kira called after him, her voice carrying a note of genuine curiosity. Ben paused at the threshold of the great doors. Without turning around, he spoke clearly enough for everyone in the chamber to hear. To prove you wrong. Then he walked through the doors, leaving behind 3 years of alliance, trust, and shared purpose. The doors closed behind him with the same soft hiss they had opened with, but the sound felt different now. Final. In the crystal chamber, 12 Zephyrian council members sat in stunned silence, staring at the pile of human armor that remained as the only evidence of what had just occurred. High Counselor Kira slowly returned to her seat, wondering if she had just made the greatest mistake of her long life. Outside in the station corridors, Commander Ben Torres walked away from everything he had built, everything he had fought for. But his step was steady, and his mind was already working on a plan that would either save the galaxy or prove Kira's harsh words completely correct. 3 days passed since Ben Torres walked away from the Zephyrian War Council. The massive space station continued its daily operations, but something had changed in the atmosphere. Human marines moved through the corridors with less confidence, while Zephyrian officers avoided eye contact when they passed their former human allies. In the main command center, High Counselor Kira stood before a holographic display showing the Devourer homeworld. The mechanical planet pulsed with dark energy, its surface covered in countless factory complexes that built the war machines threatening the galaxy. Around her, military strategists from both species worked on the assault plans. Phase 1 will begin with long-range bombardment, announced General Rex, the Zephyrian fleet commander. His silver feathers were perfectly groomed, and his voice carried the confidence of someone who had never lost a major battle. We will target their primary shipyards and power generation facilities. Estimated duration, 47 hours. Kira nodded approvingly. Casualties? Acceptable, Rex replied without emotion. We estimate losing 12% of our assault fleet, but the strategic advantage will be worth the sacrifice. Captain Sarah Chen, one of the few human officers still participating in the planning sessions, shifted uncomfortably. General, what about civilian evacuation procedures? Even Devourers might have non-combatants on their homeworld. General Rex's dark eyes fixed on the human captain. Captain Chen, Devourers are mechanical beings. They do not have civilians as we understand them. Every unit serves their war machine. But we have never actually confirmed, Sarah began. The discussion is closed, Kira interrupted. Phase 2, General Rex. Surgical strikes against command centers, Rex continued, manipulating the hologram to show attack vectors. Estimated duration, 6 standard months. We will systematically disable their ability to coordinate resistance. The presentation continued for another hour. Every detail had been calculated, every contingency planned for. It was a perfect example of Zephyrian military precision. Sarah listened with growing unease, remembering how Ben would have questioned assumptions, how he would have looked for alternatives that others missed. After the briefing ended, Sarah approached Kira privately. High Counselor, has anyone tried to locate Commander Torres? He disappeared without reporting to human command. Kira's expression remained neutral. The former commander chose to abandon his duties. His whereabouts are no longer our concern. But his ship is missing from the docking bay. A small courier vessel with advanced communication equipment. If he has gone to Devourer space alone, then he will learn the consequences of human recklessness, Kira said coldly. The galaxy will be safer with proper leadership making strategic decisions. Sarah wanted to argue further, but she recognized the dismissal in Kira's tone. She saluted and left the command center, worry gnawing at her thoughts. Far from the space station, in the deepest regions of Devourer-controlled territory, Ben Torres sat in the pilot seat of the small courier ship Harmony. The vessel was barely large enough for one person, equipped with advanced sensors and communication arrays but no weapons. Ben had chosen it specifically because it posed no threat to anyone. Around his tiny ship, space was filled with Devourer patrol craft. The mechanical vessels moved in perfect formation, their dark hulls bristling with weapon systems designed to tear apart entire fleets. Any rational being would have been terrified. Ben felt strangely calm. He had been broadcasting the same message for 6 hours now, transmitting on every frequency his equipment could generate. Mathematical sequences, musical patterns, even simple pictographic representations of peaceful intentions. Most military experts believed Devourers were incapable of communication beyond basic tactical coordination. Ben suspected they had never really tried to talk to them. A proximity alarm chimed softly. 3 Devourer destroyers had moved closer to his position, their sensor arrays focusing on his ship with uncomfortable intensity. Ben checked his readings and confirmed what he already knew: they could destroy him in seconds if they chose to. Instead, they seemed to be studying him. Ben activated his primary communication system and began a new transmission. This time, instead of mathematical concepts, he sent something more personal. He transmitted recordings of human music, starting with simple melodies and building to complex symphonies. He included recordings of children laughing, of conversations between friends, of poetry read aloud in 12 different human languages. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then his communication board lit up with incoming signals. The first transmission was a simple echo of his own mathematical sequence, but with subtle variations that suggested understanding rather than mere repetition. The second was more complex, a musical pattern that seemed to blend human melodies with something entirely alien, creating harmonies that should not have worked but somehow did. Ben's hands trembled as he realized what was happening. The Devourers were not just communicating. They were creating art. Over the next few hours, the exchange grew more sophisticated. Ben transmitted philosophical concepts about cooperation and mutual understanding. The Devourers responded with complex mathematical proofs that seemed to express similar ideas in their own logical framework. When Ben sent recordings of human emotions, joy, sadness, hope, fear, the Devourers replied with intricate energy patterns that somehow conveyed similar feelings through pure mathematics. As the conversation continued, more Devourer ships arrived. Ben found himself surrounded by dozens of mechanical vessels, all focused on this unprecedented exchange. Some part of his mind noted that he was probably in the most dangerous position any human had ever occupied. The rest of his attention was consumed by the growing realization that everything the galaxy believed about Devourers was wrong. They were not mindless destroyers driven by programming to consume and destroy. They were individuals, with thoughts, feelings, and purposes as complex as any organic species. Through patient translation of their mathematical language, Ben began to understand their true situation. The Devourers came from a parallel dimension where the fundamental laws of physics were breaking down. Their reality was collapsing, slowly but inevitably. Every passing year brought them closer to complete extinction as the fabric of their universe unraveled. They had discovered how to cross into this dimension, but they could not survive here without massive amounts of energy and processed materials. They consumed planets and civilizations not from malice, but from desperation. Every ship they built, every factory they constructed, was part of a desperate attempt to create a permanent gateway between dimensions. They hoped to evacuate their entire species before their home reality ceased to exist. Ben floated in his tiny ship, surrounded by beings who had been portrayed as monsters, and felt a profound sadness for the misunderstanding that had led to so much death on both sides. The Devourers had been trying to save themselves, and the galaxy had responded with warfare. Through careful mathematical exchanges, Ben proposed something that had never been considered before. Instead of fighting each other, what if they worked together? Human creativity combined with Devourer engineering knowledge could potentially solve both problems. The dimensional gateway could be built without consuming entire civilizations. Alternative energy sources could be developed. The war could end with salvation instead of destruction. The response from the Devourer collective was immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of ships began transmitting at once, their mathematical languages overlapping in patterns too complex for Ben to follow. It took him several minutes to realize they were not arguing or rejecting his proposal. They were excited. For the first time in their existence, someone had offered them hope instead of resistance. Someone had listened to their story and proposed cooperation instead of destruction. The concept was so alien to their experience that they struggled to process it through their logical frameworks. Ben spent the next 18 hours in detailed discussion with Devourer engineers and philosophers. They showed him their dimensional technology, explaining the principles behind their gateway construction. He shared human theories about alternative energy sources and creative problem-solving techniques that Devourer logic had never considered. Together, they began designing something that had never existed before, a collaborative solution to an impossible problem. The gateway could be built using volunteer materials and energy donations from various species, powered by revolutionary energy sources that would benefit everyone involved. The Devourers could evacuate their dying dimension while actually helping the galaxy advance technologically. As the plans took shape, Ben realized he needed to contact the Zephyrian fleet before they launched their assault. But first, he needed proof that his impossible plan could actually work. The lead Devourer vessel, a massive constructor ship, moved alongside his tiny courier. Through the communication link, its commander transmitted an invitation. Ben could come aboard their ship, see their technology firsthand, and help build a prototype of the collaborative gateway. Ben looked at his simple ship, then at the mechanical giant beside him. Every human instinct screamed warnings about boarding an enemy vessel. Every rational thought reminded him that this could be an elaborate trap. But if he was right, if cooperation was possible, then someone had to take the first step. He transmitted his acceptance and prepared to dock with a Devourer ship. As his small vessel was drawn into the constructor's docking bay, Ben wondered if Kira had been right about human recklessness. The difference was, this time his recklessness might save the galaxy instead of endangering it. Meanwhile, the Zephyrian assault fleet completed its final preparations and began moving toward the Devourer homeworld, unaware that everything they believed about their enemy was about to change forever. The Zephyrian assault fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Devourer homeworld system. 200 warships arranged themselves in perfect battle formation, their weapons powered and targeting systems locked onto the mechanical planet ahead. High Counselor Kira stood on the bridge of the flagship Skybreaker, watching the tactical displays with satisfaction. "All ships report ready for Phase 1 bombardment," announced General Rex, his silver feathers gleaming under the bridge lights. Long-range sensors confirmed Devourer fleet positions. They appear to be in standard defensive formations. Kira nodded approvingly. "Commence the attack. Let us end this war with proper strategy and careful planning." But as the fleet moved closer to their target, something appeared on the sensors that made no sense at all. Lieutenant Terra, the communications officer, looked up from her station with confusion written across her young face. "High Counselor, we are receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It appears to be coming from a human vessel." Kira's feathers bristled with surprise. "Impossible. No human ships were authorized to enter this system." "The signal is definitely human in origin," Terra confirmed, checking her readings twice. "It matches the signature of the courier ship that went missing from our station 3 days ago." General Rex moved to the communications console, his expression darkening. "If human forces have launched an unauthorized attack, they may have compromised our entire strategy. Open the channel." The main view screen activated, showing a transmission from the planet's surface. What they saw defied every military principle they understood. Ben Torres sat in what appeared to be a Devourer command center, surrounded by massive mechanical beings. He looked tired but unharmed, and he was clearly working alongside their supposed enemies. "High Counselor Kira," Ben said, looking directly into the camera. "I need to speak with you immediately. Do not begin your bombardment. The situation here has changed completely." Kira stared at the screen in disbelief. "Commander Torres, you are in violation of every military protocol. You abandoned your post and entered enemy territory without authorization. Explain your presence on that planet immediately." Ben glanced around at the Devourer beings surrounding him, several of whom were operating complex machinery that hummed with energy. "High Counselor, everything we believed about the Devourers was wrong. They are not mindless destroyers. They are refugees." "Refugees?" General Rex stepped forward, his voice sharp with disbelief. "Those machines have destroyed 43 star systems. They have killed billions of beings across the galaxy. Because they are trying to survive," Ben replied calmly. "Their home dimension is collapsing. They need massive amounts of energy and materials to build a gateway that will save their entire species. They have been consuming planets because they saw no other option." Captain Sarah Chen, who had been standing quietly at the back of the bridge, moved closer to the screen. "Ben, are you saying they can be reasoned with?" "More than that," Ben said, and he turned slightly to gesture at the machinery around him. "We are building a solution together. A dimensional gateway that does not require destroying civilizations. It can be powered by voluntary energy donations and constructed with materials freely given by various species." The bridge fell silent. Several Zephyrian officers exchanged uncertain glances. The concept of cooperation with Devourers had never been considered by anyone in their strategic planning. High Counselor Kira studied the transmission carefully. Behind Ben, she could see Devourer beings working on complex devices, their movements purposeful and intelligent rather than programmed and mechanical. "Commander Torres, even if what you claim is true, you violated direct orders. You abandoned your duties and entered enemy territory alone. This is exactly the kind of reckless behavior we cannot tolerate." Ben's expression grew serious. "You said humans are too emotional and reckless for strategy. You were right, High Counselor. We do not calculate acceptable losses or plan efficient destruction the way Zephyrians do." Kira felt a moment of vindication. "Then you admit your methods are flawed?" "No," Ben said quietly. "I admit our methods are different. Instead of planning how to destroy our enemies most efficiently, we imagine impossible solutions. Instead of accepting that war is inevitable, we risk everything to find alternatives." On the bridge, several younger Zephyrian officers looked thoughtful. Lieutenant Terra spoke hesitantly. "High Counselor, if there is a possibility of ending this war without the projected casualties." "The possibility is remote," General Rex interrupted. "Human emotional thinking cannot replace proper military strategy. We should proceed with the bombardment before this situation becomes more complicated." But before anyone could respond, new contacts appeared on the tactical sensors. Devourer ships were moving toward the Zephyrian fleet, but they were not in attack formation. Instead, they approached slowly, their weapons powered down, transmitting mathematical sequences that the translation computers identified as requests for peaceful communication. "High Counselor," Ben continued from the planet's surface, "the gateway prototype is almost complete. If you give me 24 hours, I can prove that cooperation is possible. The Devourers are willing to demonstrate their peaceful intentions." Kira found herself facing a decision no military academy had prepared her for. Every principle of warfare demanded that she proceed with the attack. The enemy was vulnerable, her forces were in position, and delay could only benefit the Devourers. But the possibility that Ben was correct, that an entire war could be ended through cooperation rather than destruction, made her hesitate. "You are asking me to risk the lives of every being in this fleet based on human intuition," Kira said finally. "I am asking you to trust that sometimes the impossible solution is the right one," Ben replied. The debate might have continued, but it was interrupted by a massive energy surge from the planet below. The dimensional gateway that Ben and the Devourers had been constructing came online, creating a swirling portal of energy that connected two different realities. Through the gateway, the Zephyrian sensors detected the dying dimension the Devourers called home. The readings were undeniable. The parallel universe was indeed collapsing, its fundamental forces breaking down in a cascade of entropy that would consume everything within it. The Devourer homeworld was not a military stronghold, it was a refugee camp for an entire species facing extinction. "Dear ancestors," whispered Lieutenant Terra, staring at the sensor data. "They really are trying to escape a dying universe." On the planet's surface, Devourer evacuation ships began moving through the gateway in organized groups. Each vessel that passed through transmitted gratitude in mathematical languages that the Zephyrian computers could now translate. The Devourers were not fleeing to continue their war, they were departing to find empty space where they could rebuild their civilization without threatening anyone. But before leaving, the Devourer leadership transmitted detailed technical specifications to the Zephyrian fleet. Advanced energy generation systems, dimensional manipulation technology, manufacturing techniques that could revolutionize industry across the galaxy. They were sharing their knowledge as a gift to the species that had chosen cooperation over conquest. High Counselor Kira watched in stunned silence as the most feared enemy in galactic history transformed into a departing ally. The war that had claimed billions of lives was ending not with a climactic battle, but with a scientific breakthrough and an act of mutual understanding. "Commander Torres," Kira said into the communication channel, her voice strangely subdued. "Request permission to beam down to the planet's surface. The Council wishes to speak with you directly." "Permission granted, High Counselor," Ben replied. "But I should warn you, the Devourers want to thank the Zephyrian people personally before they complete their evacuation. They are grateful that someone finally listened to their story." An hour later, Kira stood in the Devourer Command Center, surrounded by mechanical beings whose intelligence and dignity were unmistakable. Through translation devices, she listened as their leaders explained their history, their desperation, and their gratitude for the human who had offered them hope instead of destruction. When the last Devourer ship passed through the dimensional gateway, the portal collapsed safely, leaving behind only empty space where their homeworld had been. The threat that had terrorized the galaxy for decades was gone, not destroyed but departed, carrying with them gifts of technology that would benefit countless civilizations. Ben approached Kira as she prepared to return to her ship. "High Counselor, the Zephyrian Council formally requests your return to service. We have underestimated human strategic thinking." Ben looked at her thoughtfully. "You said humans think with our hearts instead of our minds. You were right about that too. Sometimes the galaxy needs leaders who imagine impossible solutions instead of calculating probable failures." Kira studied the human who had proven her wrong in the most spectacular way possible. "Commander Torres, how did you know this approach would work? How did you risk everything on such an uncertain possibility?" Ben smiled slightly. "Because that is what humans do, High Counselor. We do not think like you do. We do not plan for acceptable losses or efficient victories. Instead, we believe that enemies can become friends, that problems can become opportunities, that the most dangerous situations might contain the most beautiful solutions." As they prepared to depart the planet, Kira realized she was witnessing the greatest diplomatic achievement in galactic history. It had been accomplished not through superior firepower or careful strategy, but through the uniquely human belief that understanding was more powerful than destruction. "Commander Torres," she said formally, "the Zephyrian Council offers you command of our first joint exploration fleet. We have much to learn from human strategic thinking." Ben nodded respectfully. "I accept, High Counselor. But this time, we plan our missions together. Zephyrian wisdom and human creativity working as partners, not as superior and subordinate." As their ships departed the empty star system, both species carried with them the knowledge that the galaxy was safer because someone had chosen to listen instead of attack, to cooperate instead of conquer. The war was over, but more importantly, a new kind of peace had begun.